Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It's Geoff, Mosher, Adam Caplan. Inside the Birds is back, and Adam Caplan, you, my friend, are back. Now, I don't know how great that is because you were in Arizona at the Biltmore Resort. I don't know if you stayed at the Biltmore Resort, but you were
No.
there for yeah, I didn't think so. You were there for owners' meetings. It's a for anyone who has never been to Arizona or the Biltmore, it's a really, really nice resort. It's just, you're out there in the Southwest. The weather at this time of the year is fantastic, as Adam will attest to in a second. And I imagine you enjoyed just usually in April, the weather in Arizona is perfect, like 80 during the day, but not humid. And then at night, it's like nice. You can wear a vest.
Yeah, exactly. So it was 50s in the morning and 70s, high 70s, low 80s in the afternoon. As you said, there's no humidity. Actually, since you've been there, in fact, they were supposed to have the owners meetings in 2020, but because of the pandemic, they didn't have it. That was going to be the last time they had it in Phoenix at the Biltmore. But they built a in the middle where it was empty. They built like a bar in the middle there, and they have like water around it, and then they built like this mini pool behind it. It's actually pretty cool. So
I saw
a
your
lot has
pictures
happened.
on Instagram. I was like,
Yeah,
wow, I don't
that was it.
remember
Yeah, that
that.
was it. That was the
Yeah.
one. That was exactly what it was. So it was good to see people. We have that dinner on Monday night. For the NFL has their annual dinner sort of get together with all the teams get together and people from the league, and then they let the media in. So it was good to see a lot of head coaches and GMs there. Saw Jeffrey Lurie there as well. It's good to see him. Didn't really get a
Yeah.
chance to chat with him. Sometimes I have, but over the years. But yeah, and all the owners were there, just about. So it's good to see.
Did you pet the llamas?
No, 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 not this time.
I saw pictures of Jimmy Kempski all over the llamas and Dave Zangaro petting llamas. So
Yes,
I was wondering if
yeah,
you.
I had a good time though. It was there was really cool thing about that is there are 3 or 4 GMs I got to speak to alone. Like as you know, the at that owners meetings, opposed to the breakers in Florida, the this place is really spread out, so you could talk to people for half an hour and 45 minutes and not get interrupted, which is cool. So
Yep.
it's good. This is the value of because at the combine it's much harder to get these guys along. Same with the Senior Bowl, so it's definitely one of my favorite events.
Well, a lot came out of owners' meetings, Adam, from the Eagles. We'll get into things that Howie Roseman said, things Nick Sirianni said, and also things
Hmm.
Jeffrey Lurie said that I think were all really important, getting into some lingering contract info. By the way, I'm sure it's been out there, but I didn't see what was the reason that Nick Sirianni was missing for the NFL head coaches. Did you
I
find
have
out?
no idea.
He
Didn't even
wasn't
see it.
there.
Yeah.
I've never seen that
Okay.
before.
Well, no, they so they've had head coach. In fact, they've had GMs not show up or coaches not show up. Usually, it's because they're
Really?
playing golf.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the Biltmore has a golf course, so you basically have to pass it when you drive in.
Right.
In this case, take an Uber. So yeah, it's no big deal. But yeah, obviously if you don't see me, you're like, oh wow, what's going on? I get that, I
The
get it.
year I
But
was the 1 or 2 years I was there, they had all 32 coaches take the picture. So it almost seems pointless to take the picture if you don't have all 32. I don't know. It just seems a little weird to me.
no,
But
actually, one year Mike McCarthy didn't go one year, which I thought was odd with the
right.
Cowboys.
I remember that. I rember.
Yeah, that
All
was
right.
weird.
All right. Good stuff. We'll get into everything that came out of there. Some of the things that came out of there were good as far as for Inside the Birds listeners because it validated some of the things we've said about some of the players and some of the just the way the off season's gone. Uh,
Though,
yeah,
though, Siriani and I was talking about this in the chat on Wednesday night. I don't want to dismiss what he says, but he says stuff and it doesn't happen.
there are
He
times that happens. Yes.
Yeah. Now I'm not. I know he tries to pump guys up. I believe he means what he says, but he just says stuff. Sometimes I go, okay, let's see if it happens because we know what happened with Quez Watkins. So that was absurd what he said. In fact, if you recall, uh, like within 2 weeks after he said that, they were trying to sign Allen Robinson, as we reported there. They made a
Hmm.
pretty decent offer, but the Rams beat it. And then the Ridley, they would have had Calvin Ridley had he not had his off the field issue. And then of course they traded for AJ Brown. So
Yeah. So
anyway,
the quote Adam's referring to, for those who may not remember, is Nick Sirianni last year at, was it the combine or owners meeting? One of those
yeah,
public offseason events where he said that he felt Quez Watkins could be the best number 2 wide receiver
could be.
he's ever coached. I mean, this is a guy who was the wide receivers coach for the Chargers, with Mike Williams and with Keenan Allen. So he was putting Quez Watkins in some major territory there at the time. And to Adam's point, there was probably a lot of hyperbole there. He's trying to pump up his guys, but you're right. It's sort of insulted the average fan intelligence when you say something like that. I
Yeah,
agree.
and the Eagles fans are smart, man. They read up, they know what's going on, and I remember when we talked about it. As soon as it wouldn't have been at the owners' meetings because they had, well, I have to look what the date was, but remember now they made the trade for AJ Brown during the draft, but we had already known by the owners' meetings last year that they tried to make the trade for Ridley and that they tried to sign Allen Robinson. So it just
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciate that he's trying to be positive, but sometimes I kind of roll my eyes and go, here we go again. Let's see if it actually happens. But you got to take him for his word, then dissect it if it doesn't happen.
All right, well, good. That leads us in to early part of the podcast. There's a guy I want to ask. He spoke about that I want to ask you. Does it pass the smell test, or do you think it's hyperbole? We'll get into that in a few minutes. The Intel with Greg Cosell is up on the platform. This was a great one, by the way. Got a lot of great feedback. Greg really did his homework on the cornerbacks that we talked about. From Witherspoon to Christian Gonzalez and Joey Porter and Cam Smith. He had breakdown. I think we threw about 12 to 14 corners on him. And sometimes with Greg, with anybody, with certain positions, once you get past like the first 4 or 5 and the prospects start to look a little similar, you start to hear the same buzzwords like this guy's got this and this guy's got that. And it sounds monotonous, but these cornerbacks are truly individual. Like they have different individual traits. And Greg was able to go through each single one and kind of differentiate one from another, especially like what schemes they were best flourish in. So it's a really good episode. I had no idea, by the way, that Devin Witherspoon, who's a big part of the conversation, played that much slot at
Yeah.
I knew he was a light guy and that he might project that way, but it's a fair question. Can a guy who's 180 pounds, 5'10", play the slot? And of course, Emmanuel Forbes at 165 pounds would be one of the lightest cornerbacks you would ever see.
It's crazy. Yeah. So, and there was a great question. I forget who asked me in the chat on Wednesday night about, does Greg's information change the way we think? And I said, not really. But what it does is, and I could add to what I was talking about in the chat, I'll take Greg's information and I'll act. There would be some players who say, hey, did you see this? They won't know I'm asking about what Greg told us, but I'm just curious about what their reaction would be when we take this information and use it. So no, it's phenomenal. This is the best one we've done in whatever 2 years. This was like it. This class of corners is much deeper than last year. Now, last year's was top heavy. Now, who knew Tariq Woolen was a 5th round pick for the Seahawks would be as good?
Right.
But it doesn't have a Sauce Gardner. Not that any draft is going to have one, or J.C. Horn, but it's really deep, and you don't have to take a corner in the first round. There might be guys in the 3rd round that could come and start. Who knows?
No doubt about it. Greg made that point that just based on size and measurables alone, which are very big at the cornerback position, we talked to him about that. Sometimes there are positions where traits don't matter as much. You see that at wide receiver, a guy can overcome a lack of traits to be a good wide receiver in the league, but cornerback, it's hard. If you don't have the size, speed, measurables, athletic testing, it's hard to really excel in the NFL. And Greg made the point that, you can probably find 8, 9, 10 guys, right, who will all meet those criteria. And you're not going to probably find 8, 9, 10 that go in the top 30 or 40, but, top 20, maybe 30, 40. And as you said, getting to the 3rd round, you can get yourself a pretty good player. So it's a really good episode. Next week, I believe we're doing defensive tackles. So look out for that. But you've got to make sure you've checked out this latest one on cornerbacks. As Adam mentioned, he did the chat with his Patreon subscribers on Discord on Wednesday night. I imagine that went well. I wasn't able to catch it. Sometimes
Yeah,
I am.
it was fun. It was fun because guys are looking towards the draft. They had a couple questions about free agency, particularly slot corner, a slot receiver. Jarvis Landry would be a great signing for them because there with Marvin. Not that Marvin Jones could be a slot receiver, but he would have been a good third receiver just in general.
Hmm.
But he went back to one of the teams he's played for before he agreed to a deal with the Lions on Wednesday, so that takes him off the board. They're not the receiver positions really been picked over in free agency. And look, they could also draft somebody, but the other thing is they've got to get more draft picks for this year. Next year they're going to have a ton, but this year they need the best way to do it would be to trade down and get more picks. So we'll have to see what happens. But overall, yeah, it's a situational receiver. They have to add someone, which we're going to get into as we break down the offense as we stand here 4 weeks away from the draft.
Do you think the Eagles have anybody on the roster right now that Howie would be willing to trade for a draft pick?
Who could get value? Okay, so who would have value?
That's where I'm trying. I mean, I've got like two guys, and again, I don't know that he wants to weaken himself at this position to do it. Now, I don't know how much trade value either of them have. I mean, is Quez Watkins somebody that you think could get you a 5? You know, if you don't think he could be
Probably.
a slot, you've got your two outside guys. Like, do you think you can get something for Quez Watkins? That would be one guy.
Yep.
And Avante Maddox, who has been a very good corner, but has also been hurt a lot for them. I think he has 1 year left on the extension that he
Mm-hmm.
signed. You're probably going to go into this year drafting a corner who could start off in the slot while you've got Bradbury and Slay on the outside. You have Zech McPherson to at least give him a shot for year 3 to see what you got. I don't know. I mean, it sort of goes back to you don't want to get rid of guys, but you need draft picks, and you do have certain guys who are good, but either have an injury history or they're coming up at the end of a deal. So, you know, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out if there's someone that you think of that what could be interesting trade bait, because there's always a move that you never expect.
Well, Maddox, see, here's the problem though. If you trade him, Josiah Scott, he obviously struggled mightily filling in for him, and Gordon Johnson is gone now, so you just don't have that guy. McPherson, in limited playing time, he hasn't really done much. You can't count on him other than special teams in any way. We know that Edmonds could cover the slot. You could try. He's done it before. He's not great at it. Evans had to do some of that last year. He's not great at it. They're in a kind of a tough way right now. They just don't have the cornerback depth to really trade from him. I mean, could they do it? Sure, but then it opens up a giant hole. Then you have to get a corner then in this draft who could play inside or outside. But the problem is, again, that forces your hand because they don't have enough draft picks, and that's
Yeah,
playing to your point. They need to get some, and I felt all along, and because this cornerback draft is deep, maybe they could trade down whether at 30 or at 10 and get those mid-round picks, which they really need.
interesting. Yeah, just food for thought. Because like I
Sure.
said, there's always a sort of an unexpected move, and we know that the Eagles need draft picks. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens there. All right, let's get into some of the things that came out of Arizona, the owners' meetings. Not something less Eagles related. Obviously, the Eagles were the team that pushed for a new uniform number protocol. Now, the
They
funny
got
thing
it.
is, right? They got it. The Eagles can't get anything, but they finally got the most like meaningless rule ever pushed across, and that's that they get to wear the number 0, but it's not even everybody. I think Lane Johnson was so like excited about it, and then he found out that you can't wear 0 if you're a lineman. So I
Offense,
guess you
yeah.
can only do it if you're a skill position or a non-lineman to be able to wear 0.
Correct. And that includes defensive linemen. In fact, I'm going to read you the language the NFL sent me. It's actually kind of funny.
Oh God.
And I need to ask who came up with the idea. I know what's the guy's name? John Ferrari, I know is heavily involved with League Matters. That's why he's really good at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder who came up with the idea to do this
Yeah, like how
numbers.
much push was there for this that the Eagles felt necessary to bring this to the table at the owners' meeting?
exactly what I'm doing. You nailed it. So let me. I have to find this because it's actually very funny. I chuckled when I saw what
Well,
the Eagles' reasoning was.
uh-huh. While you
They
look
have to
for it,
come.
go ahead.
What's that?
I was gonna say, while you look for it, I
Yeah.
want you to give me the eagle that you see naturally wearing the number 0, where you're like, that works. I've got one guy in my head. I was wondering if you have anybody in your head.
Who's going to be Agent Zero? Yeah,
Yes, who would be it? Do you have an eagle that comes to mind that you're like, you know what? I think it makes sense for that
boy,
guy.
I would have loved to see Lane do it. He can't because he's a lot.
I see. I can't see a lineman wearing 0.
Not just that he'd be great. It'd just be great.
Wasn't there a
Who would
baseball
be
player who wore 0, like a famous ball player? I know Jeffrey Leonard, I think, wore 00.
Jeffrey Leonard?
Didn't he
Wow.
play for the Giants or the
Yeah,
Padres?
sure. Is right-handed batter. Oh no, the language, the reason that the Eagles submitted with flexibility in signing jersey numbers. Oh well, Jeffrey Lurie talked about it. We might as well mention that they started running out of numbers,
Mm-hmm.
so they want to be able to. Because remember, is Slate 2
Slay is 2. Oh, yes. Yeah.
and McPherson was 3. Exactly. I mean, not Pascal was 3.
Pascal is 3. Right, right.
Right. But one of the teams sent something, one of their proposals, and it also said fan interest was one of the reasons,
Fan
but it
intro.
wasn't the. Oh, okay, here it is. No, no, no. Okay, okay. Now on the Eagles' proposal for maintaining the ball after the 4th and 20 play,
Mm-hmm.
the reasoning was competitive equity and fan engagement.
Right. That was the
I
Eagles'
get that.
rationale for why,
Yeah,
which, of course, that's play of game type of rule
yeah.
that would,
But
I think, make it interesting.
sure.
What makes interesting about the number 0? I don't know. It's just another jersey that they can sell, probably to make money that they didn't have a chance to before. But when I envision an Eagles player wearing the number 0, I feel like like Britton Covey to me would look right in the number 0. I imagine small, compact, and quick, or maybe a Boston Scott, somebody
I
like
could see
that
Boston
wearing the
Scott.
number
Yeah,
0.
yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be funny if like 5 players want it, and like do they throw in money into a hat and whoever like
Right.
do do you do a shootout 1 2 3 shoot
Can you imagine if Jordan Davis had an opportunity to wear a 0 if they gave it to lineman?
Oh man,
I mean, it would probably, he's so
they would.
enormous, it would probably look more
Yeah,
like an O than a 0.
I've seen players, I know you've seen this, where
Uh-huh.
you go to a training camp and you could tell the jersey stretched out
Yeah,
and that it took him a while to get the jersey on.
that's right. And then
But
all the
anyway,
guys who wear like at training camp, it's so annoying when you're trying to find, bottom roster players, and they've got the half jersey thing. They got it all pulled up to their
or
chest.
oh, they roll it up. A lot
Yeah.
of players do that, but the worst is when you have offensive, defensive players with the same number in training camp. You're allowed
Oh,
to do that.
awful.
I hate that's the one I can't, because especially when it's two like guys who were just invited to training camp. You're like, who are these guys? Like, well, what are they doing? Anyway,
Well, I can't wait for the historical moment that we get when we see the first Eagle player wearing 0. That'll be we'll
yes.
do a whole emergency ITB on it, I guarantee you. So whatever became though of the rule change that they were not the fourth and instead of going for it on 4th down, you get what, 4th and 15? What am I talking? Instead of an onside kick, I mean, you try to complete 4th and 15,
Fourth
wasn't
and
that
20, right?
4th and
Right.
20?
It didn't pass, but I need to look if it got tabled or not. Might have got
I think it
some
that
got
I think
tabled.
it did. I think it got
I
tabled.
think some got tabled. I love when they say tabled.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no. No, it got tabled. Remember, it got tabled at 21, and they
Yeah.
voted on it again. It got tabled again.
Tabled
Yeah.
every year, which is basically saying it's not going to happen.
You never know. You never know. But the one that I know that Belichick was never going to get past. He wanted you to be able to challenge any penalty. He's done that a couple times too. That never had a chance to pass.
Right.
But the roughing the passer rule didn't pass. It now the league has statistics. Very few. I mean, of all of them called, I guess there's a small percentage that were wrong.
Yeah.
And when they give the teams the clubs the statistics, the clubs go, okay, well, I guess it's not as bad as we thought, and they don't pass it. So that's the unfortunate thing, because there were questionable calls with that of cost teams games over the years, but it's been so few. There's
Mm.
just not enough momentum for it.
Yeah, ask Grady Jarrett. Remember that hit on Tom Brady? That
The
was, I
weight
mean,
fall, was it the
ridiculous.
weight, was the body weight?
Yeah, yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
that's a tough one.
That's I would bet my life that that was one of the few that they found that probably would have been overturned. But like you said, their data says that most of them would stand, so most of them
Yeah.
stand, no big deal. The only other thing was the helmets, right? The green, the midnight green, or the Kelly
Oh,
green.
Kelly jerseys, Kelly green
Yes,
jerseys. Jeffrey Lurie announced it. Yeah, that was a nice little drop there because people were
right.
asking. And I'll say this, he actually talked about this at last year's owner meetings or 2 years ago. He's so fan in tune. You know, he's on Twitter. I've known that for years. He's, you know, not that he's the only owner who's on Twitter. When I say on Twitter, he's following people. You know, he likes to see what's out there. He's very well aware that the fans want the Kelly Greens back, and they got their wish. Now, he did say that maybe the helmets had to get approved. That the jerseys have, but
Right.
maybe it gets approved in a month. I don't know what the timeline is, but it
Yeah.
they want to. I want the whole thing, man. Those Kelly Greens, man, were pretty
Yeah, if
cool.
they don't approve the helmet, I mean, it's fine. People are still going to be happy with the Kelly Green jersey, but it's almost ridiculous if they don't. I mean, if you're going
Yeah,
to let them wear the throwback jersey, let them wear the throwback helmet.
yeah,
Plus,
yeah.
you're the NFL. You probably can figure out a way to monetize it. You
Of
start
course
selling
they can. Are you
the
kidding? Oh
throwback
my,
helmets. I mean,
like
geez, how hard is this?
I have my Eagles helmet here. Now I love the Panthers helmet. I want to get the mini helmet. Yeah, I don't collect, autographs or anything like that. I just like unique things. But I love that Panthers helmet. I've seen it up close, but that is a sharp helmet with the
Yeah.
black and the pale blue or light blue. But yeah, I'm interested to see what that's going to look like. Because didn't they for the throwbacks? Did they wear green? Did they wear the Kelly Greens throwbacks
Uh, I
years
forget
ago?
now. I
Yeah.
forget. Wait,
Well,
what do you mean when they wore the throwbacks?
do you remember? Okay, so remember the throwback jerseys teams wear? You know they're also called
The
the
color rush?
Nike. Yeah, Color Rush. Yes, Color Rush.
You know, they didn't wear it. Like, I don't. Well, first of all, I don't think did they play in a Thursday night game in a color rush? Because I thought they ended the color rush by the time the Eagles got to it. I don't remember, but it definitely
Yeah.
wasn't what they want as far as the old Kelly
Okay,
Green plus
because
throwback
the,
jersey.
the the worst throwbacks were those. Well, Kevin Curtis had the huge game against the Lions, but
That was the throwback to the Swedish colors,
yeah, they
right?
were
The blue
terrible.
and yellow.
Terrible.
Gee.
The worst ever are the Bumblebee ones. The Steelers wore Ben Roethlisberger. It's so bad,
Awful.
man.
Awful. And then the
I,
Acme Packer one wasn't great either. Although
yeah,
I bet the Packer fan may have liked it. I just didn't think it looked that
I'm
good.
probably one of the few people alive who like the Color Rush Jaguars mustard yellow
You're
style.
definitely one of the few people alive
I
who like that.
know. I like bright colors, man.
In fact, you should probably go get checked out by a medical professional tomorrow because those things were hideous.
Once amongst other things. Anyway.
All right, yeah, among others. And I'll be right next. All right, so the head coach spoke. They located him. He was at his breakfast like he should have been, and had some really interesting comments. I mean, not really interesting, but he had some
Yeah.
interesting things to say about some. So I will ask you this. First, I will tell people who may not have seen it that Nick Sirianni had some pretty strong comments, positive comments to say about Trey Sermon. I mean, he went on a little bit. He spoke about all the running backs, but one of his exact quotes about Trey Sermon was, I can't tell you how many times at practice he's made a cut or just saw him make a play on a screen or whatever it was. And you're like, man, this guy's got a chance to be really good. I wish we can get him more touches. Then he went on to sort of talk about how difficult it was to get him touches. They had their rotation. So remember, and this wasn't a question about Trey Sermon. It was more a question about what adding Rashad Penny to their group, and he sort of went through each running back one by one. And when he got to Sermon, he was like really effusive in his praise. So now I'm going to ask you, based on your earlier comments, does this pass the smell test to you, or are you thinking that he's being a little bit more hyperbolic, a la Quez Watkins is the greatest number two, or has a chance to be
I,
the best number two
I
receiver I've coached?
I believe it because you and I have known about this since like November when we checked into whether they're going to come or not. We were told strongly, absolutely not.
Right.
They want to take a look at him. They're pretty happy with him, but we didn't. I couldn't put the context to it until Sirianni said this, so that was good. But on your point, because then he was asked about Ezekiel Elliott. Oh, he's great. He went on because he could talk about it because he was cut. He's a free agent. He's on the street. So that's my point. It's like he's so positive with every player, but I'll take the guy at his word. See, here's the problem. If they sign Elliott, and we're going to get into the Eagles' offensive roster because they don't have a lead back right now, running back. But the point is this, though. When you look at this situation, yeah, as it stands now, there's no question Sermon's got a real chance to get a decent role here because they don't have that lead back right now. They may sign another guy, they may draft a guy. I know they have a lot of running backs, but you could have 10 running backs, but if you don't have a lead back, you don't have one. And that's kind of where they're at.
That is true. They do have guys who could be. Again, Kenneth Gainwell could be one. Maybe he's not built for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, their lead back last year only actually touched the ball 57% of the time. So if you added like 8 more percentage points to Kenneth Gainwell touches, he's probably getting close to that 51, 52% mark. And that sort of by de facto would make him potentially a lead back. But I understand why you sort of bristle at that. He's not the biggest guy in the world. You can't see him until he does it. You really can't see him having the ball like 18 to 20 times. Miles Sanders at least showed a couple of times in the last year or two that he can take the ball 18 to 20 times a game. It wasn't much, but he did do it a few times and had some really big games.
The one, oh, by the way, speaking of Sanders, my understanding is they actually believe he could be a 3-down back. We'll see, but obviously Deuce is coaching him, and they really believe strongly that he could be a 3-down back based on their tape study. Now you'd have 2019, he really could catch the football, and obviously since then it's been downhill in terms of catching it. But they feel like he could be that guy. I'm sort of skeptical based on what's happened the last couple of seasons, but we'll see if they do. But they are super bullish that Panthers are on Miles Sanders, so that's good for fantasy, folks.
Yeah, definitely good. Definitely good to know. Now, as far as Ezekiel Elliott, that report from Adam Schefter that he had 3 teams on the list, that sort of felt like it was a Ezekiel Elliott wish list, not a wish list by the teams, right? The Jets have 4 running backs already, don't they? I can't imagine that the Jets.
But you have to look at what they have. They've got they're obviously if Hall didn't have a torn ACL, they would be talking about Elliott.
True.
They got Bam Knight, who's the power runner with no juice at all, but he's an inside tough runner. Michael Carter, who just he didn't improve last season. He actually regressed. And Ty Johnson, who's a changeup at best. I mean, could they use another back? Sure, but I thought the whole thing was interesting how that kind of went down with that report last week on the Jets being interested. And then of course he threw the Eagles in there, and it's obviously coming from the agent. So when you look at it, the Eagles at running back, they're probably going to have to add one. I don't see how they go forward with this group, and I get that there are times they're just not going to run the football. They're going if they have their druthers, are going to be way more pass heavy. But you also need a closer, and you need to have that answer. And plus, if somebody gets hurt, like let's say Penny, for argument's sake, let's say they don't sign Elliott and they add someone like in the 3rd round and may or may not come in and play a lot. Well, if Penny gets hurt, who's the one guy they definitely want to see potentially featured, who do you have who you trust to be a 12 to 15 touch a game guy? I don't know if there's that guy there.
Good point. It's a good point. I just don't know if when you say they're going to add a guy, is it for depth or is it to be the lead back?
That's up in the air. I just, again, depth is not how many guys you have. It's about who do you trust when you need them to play. People go by numbers. That's not the way coaches look at it. Coaches look at, okay, how many do we have, but who do we trust? And if they don't trust these guys, if they have 10 guys at corner, only trust 3, they're going to tell the GM, hey, listen, we're not good there. Our quality of depth isn't good. We need somebody else. And that's like this show, we're going to get an offense today, and the next show we'll get into defense. The more I look into some of these positions, I go, man, they're asking for trouble if they don't do something.
No doubt about it. All right, couple of other interesting comments to come out of owners' meetings. So we'll look at that in a second. First, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our great sponsors. All right. Start quickly with Howie Roseman. I know he spoke to some reporters. He talked about what he said validated what we were reporting earlier in the offseason, what you had to say about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He confirmed that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was high, high, high on their list of players to bring back. And he went through and basically explained that they thought that they were going to be able to bring him back. They had the number in mind. The negotiations went differently than they saw it. That forced them to pivot. They pivoted to Slay, got
Yep.
Bradbury back at a number that they were happy to be able to get him back at, and then had to move on. And it almost, he didn't say it, but almost, and I think we've heard this from different people too. Once that happened, that was basically it for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Like once the pivot happened, there was not going to be a repivot. I've asked, well, why couldn't you at least match that Lions offer? But obviously they've got other money to allocate later to Jalen Hurts, and we'll get into that. But
Yeah.
once the pivot was done, that was it.
My gut feeling was that once they got the Slade deal done, now that timeline was insane. We've talked about this before. They tell me he's going to be cut with a June 1st, post June 1st designation. 3 hours later, they're negotiating extension. I'm pretty certain, based on logic, that once Gardner Johnson turned down their final award, their offer that week, now it could have been within the hours after that's when they turned to Slade. Maybe that afternoon they talked to Gardner Johnson's agent Kevin Connor and said, "This is it. What are you doing here?" Maybe they turned it down, because the way we heard it is like they gave that money to Slay, one way or the other.
Right.
Now, obviously, Slay got more per season than the Eagles' final offer, but that's interesting that how he said. I didn't see the quotes. I heard secondhand what he said, but no, that's look. They tried, but I think both sides, particularly Gardner Johnson, misread what he thought he should get, because we know that they were talking at the combine and the numbers they were talking were higher. But as you correctly said, and this is the most salient point of all, the money doesn't get better by week; it gets smaller.
Yeah, it doesn't get better as you get yes. So that was interesting. Confirmed from Howie Roseman on that, and I really thought Jeffrey Lurie made some really interesting comments about Nick Sirianni and the process that he's going through right now in hiring coaches. And I really thought it was particularly interesting because of how we have talked about this team and its hiring process of coaches. So what Jeffrey Lurie basically said was that Nick Sirianni does exhaustive searches for his coaches, which is obvious. I mean, they still, what is it? Today is what? Is it April 1st yet? It's March 30th, right?
Yeah.
March 30th, and the Eagles still have not announced their final coaching staff or their coaching staff for the 2023 season. That is unbelievable. It's not like they fired like 11 guys, right? I mean, so it's really quite striking that they haven't announced it yet. And Jeffrey was sort of giving an anecdote about how Nick calls him up one day and says, "Hey, I just finished my 12th interview for linebackers coach," right? So clearly Nick Sirianni, via Jeffrey Lurie, is someone who is very, very diligent in his vetting process for coaches. And I got to say, like, I have to be myself personally, and us at ITB, we have to sort of give credit where it's due, because for a long time, when this team went through like 7 wide receivers coaches in 7 years and 60 line coaches in 5 years, or whatever crazy numbers it was, you and I would keep saying, like Joe Banner, we would talk to him about it, and he would say, well, listen, if you made a mistake, you have to cut. You have to recognize that and make a change immediately. And our response was always, yeah, but if you make 6 mistakes in a row, what is your vetting process? 100%. Yeah, what is wrong with your hiring process that it takes you 6 straight years of new wide receivers coaches, or 5 straight years of new defensive line coaches? What are you doing? So I can't knock this process the way Jeffrey Lurie explains it. If Nick is this thorough, I think that's a great thing, Adam.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't want to say taken aback. I was just kind of appreciative of that he's willing, because he usually at his State of the Union things at the owners meetings usually has 2 or 3 good nuggets. Now the one was it last year where he denied I know
what you're gonna say.
I just now here we had a lot of problems with him last year because he denied his involvement on the Hurts pick. He talked about the Mailata pick. He he just said he gave an opinion.
Right.
Just a couple of the players over the years, we know in our reporting, he denied his involvement or his opinion on JJ Arcega-Whiteside, which was not true. That he didn't tell him who to pick. That's definitely true, but he definitely had an opinion. He needed to understand that when you give your opinion on a player, that's going to affect your front office decision. You shouldn't give your opinion. Even if they ask, just don't do it, because if the guy you like winds up being not the guy, and then because then they feel guilty, and then you make them feel like they're not doing their job well. So you got to be careful. It's a slippery slope when you give your opinion on players when you're not a personnel guy.
Yes, unless of course your opinion was very heavily weighted into taking Jalen Hurts, and then you look like a
It
genius.
was. It sure was. the extra Zoom channel and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. So sometimes you have to take what he said with a grain of salt. I felt like listening to him talk about this Nick Sirianni thing. Maybe he is being hyperbolic. Maybe it wasn't 12 interviews for linebackers coach, but his overriding point was just that Nick is pretty relentless in interviews, and it makes sense because he's got 3 different defensive backs coach. It took a while for him to name a linebackers coach. And again, as we sit here right now and do this podcast, I guess they're just all they're missing is a defensive quality control coach, I think, from last year's staff. And yet they still have not announced a final staff, which also makes you wonder, like, are they doing something that we just don't know about? Is there another change on the way? So it's
and
just,
by the way, Sirianni was not very he was not comfortable talking about Denard Wilson. That was, of all the discussions at the owners meetings, you could just he just was not comfortable talking about it. You could see his body language.
yeah.
He was never going to tell the truth of that one, what really happened. But
Yeah, I wonder if he regrets anything that may have happened that led to Denard Wilson leaving.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know, but it was kind of just rewatching it, and I always enjoy him talking. I really do. He talks a lot, but he gives. Look, at least he's willing to talk. Some as much as we love Andy Reid, Andy sometimes just gives you very little. Nick gives you a lot. Now, whether you believe it or not, it's another story. But the fact of the matter is, he gave a lot of opinions and what he thought, and we'll see if this turns out to be true. Particularly with Trey Sermon.
Do you want to start a little, like, I don't know, like a gambling game or something on like over under on when this Eagles final coaching roster is announced to the public?
All right. Well, Saturday is April 1st.
Yeah.
April Fool's Day, right? Wouldn't
Yeah,
be funny.
I was just thinking, what a perfect day.
Right. But this could be a league record. What's the latest in NFL history? That the team named the coaching staff. Finalized it.
Yeah. Oh man. Anything else that Jeffrey Lurie said or that came out of owners meeting? Oh, what do you think of the? I don't know what to make of this whole. I guess because not every owner is fond of this, but there could be. You could play on Thursday Night Football twice in one season. I look at that with a side eye. I think that's very strange.
Well, you got the Amazon situation, which to get eventually, and I'm sure it'll happen eventually. I know there was some blowback, but I was at Roger Goodell's press conference on Tuesday. He's so funny because he's so obvious. Remember the NFLPA said they would never vote for or approve or go along with a 17-game season for years, and they finally gave in. There was blowback. Slay was one of them on Twitter about potentially having games flexed to Thursday. It's just funny because they're like, oh, they want to make Jeff Bezos happy, which of course Goodell's the biggest denier. He will not give in to anything that's not league or pro league, pro NFL. It's just kind of comical. But it'll eventually happen because when it's about money, or if Roger Goodell wants something, it almost always happens.
Yeah,
eventually.
Yeah, and plus, so I don't like it for now, but I do know that sometime in the near future, the NFL is going to be an 18-game schedule, right? And then when it does go to that, it's going to go to an 18-game schedule.
I'm okay. Are you okay with the 17 games? Fine.
I was fine with 16. I don't like 17 because I don't like the unevenness, and then you don't. Some years you get an extra home. I either do 16 or 18. I don't like odd numbers, but they're going to go to 18, and then when that happens, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a second bye week added. And if that
Oh,
happens,
yeah, yeah,
you'll
for
see a
sure.
lot more of those Thursday night teams that have to play a second Thursday night game are probably going to get the second bye week after that to make it more fair from a rest
What did
standpoint.
Trey Thomas tell us? One year, didn't he have their only bye was in week 16 or something?
Yeah, I didn't believe him. I went and fact checked it, and he was
Look it
right.
up.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, "What's the point of having a bye in week
I
16?"
know.
I mean,
It's
or
dumb.
15, whatever it was.
The NFL had to come a long way in getting things right. Now the competition committee, before we move along here, they do a really good job. I'm pretty impressed with their decision making on rules and stuff. But the personal foul stuff, like the one that they have to clean up, the one that bothers me the most is defensive holding. The savvy veteran corners, they know if a guy's going to run by him, just go hold. It's not a spot foul. It's only 5 yards
Right.
because you're going to get beat for a touchdown. Just grab the guy's jersey and it's only 5. That's one that bothers me. It's got to get cleaned up someday.
No doubt about it. All right, we're going to move on. We'll get into a little contract update information and then just take a look at some areas of the roster now that we know some signings are in. First, we'll tell everybody to make sure you check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation. Now let's pause and hear from other great friends, Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam just sent you. You will get a great deal. Now, I also want to take a second because today, Adam, is for most people who are listening to this on the day the podcast comes out, it's one of my favorite days of the year. It's opening day.
Oh, yeah.
Got Phillies baseball. We got all sorts of Major League Baseball. It's on TV all day long. I get very excited about that. And you know how into the Phillies I am and have been. So the podcast that I do with Frank Close, it's called Powder Blue Podcast. So if you're really into the Phillies and you like Phillies podcast, please listen. Frank's a great Phillies insider, does a lot of great work. And I like our podcast. We talk a lot of good Phillies. So again, it's called the Powder Blue Podcast. If you're looking for some Phillies talk, make sure you tune in.
What's on Twitter? What's the Twitter?
At Powder Blue Phils, I believe is on
Got
Twitter. Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate that. All right. So somebody who's coming to the Philadelphia area, Terrell Edmonds, he used to be a Steeler. He's making the cross-state journey. His contract is in, and it's quite as shocking as I thought as when he even signed it. It's just staggering that a guy with this much experience was able to be had at this rate, Adam.
Here's what our contract source sent to me: 1 year, $2 million, 1.0 million base. Half of it's actually less than half of it's fully guaranteed. 600 grand fully guaranteed at signing, which includes the 250,000 signing bonus. 350 of his base is fully guaranteed. And then he's got an additional 670,000 per game roster bonuses, totaling 2 million. I don't know if there's any incentives in it, but the base deal is just 2 million. So think about it. This guy was a first round pick. The last 2 years, he signed for just over 2.5 million last year, 2 million this year. If you listen to Greg Cosell on this show that dropped on Wednesday, you'll know why this guy is just an okay football player. He's really, I know there's certain things he can do. The data shows it, the tape shows it in terms of covering tight ends. Greg talks about it. And our pro personnel guy said he can cover tight ends, he can cover the slot, but he's really not great at it.
Right.
So you know now the guy's just an okay player. Now, what I did say in our last show was that all that's true, but sometimes when guys change teams, maybe they're better, maybe they're used differently. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But he was a guy who was a traits player, but never played up to those traits as a first round pick.
Right. One of the bigger things that Greg said that I guess would make you feel comfortable, sort of, is that he does see Terrell Edmonds as a player who can function all right in a split safety system. Even though you're the deep safety in that regard, you're not the single high safety. You're not asked to cover hash mark to hash mark or anything like that, outside to outside. So, I guess it could make you feel a little bit better, but it's not like it's not like his role is center field or being deep. It never really was in Pittsburgh. He's, again, a box guy. And this will be a challenge, I think, for Sean Desai to try to figure it out. Gannon had a little bit of a luxury there. Obviously, he had C.J. Gardner-Johnson playing at the height of his game, and he had Marcus Epps, who really came into his own as a developmental guy who the team got to mold. Like, I don't know if Terrell Edmonds comes here and you make him anything different than what he is, but at least he's sort of old reliable in that you know what you're going to get with him.
Yeah, and look, he gets a second chance here with another team. See what happens. It doesn't preclude them from doing anything in the draft at safety, other than they wouldn't do it in the first round to make you happy. But
what happens if they do? What am I supposed to do if they
that?
take a safety in the first round?
I told someone in Wednesday night's chat that you would pass out if they did that. There's no question. You probably wouldn't be able to sleep that night.
I may have to resign from ITB if this ever happens. And now I'm thinking, at 30 is a range where you're usually picking a player on your board who has a second round grade, right? Because we know that most teams only have about 13 to 15 first round prospects. You get to 30, you might even be getting a player who's late 2, early 3 in the grading system. And that's par for the course for the Eagles and safety. So do I got to worry about 30 becoming a safety?
Oh, by the way, I asked the GM, and he said he would tell me when he gets a chance, because he has asked the scouting director, because he didn't know offhand. He said he could have given me a ballpark on how many first round picks his particular team had, the first round grades he gave.
Sure.
He said he thought, he wasn't 100% sure. He said he would get that for us. And another nugget from the owners' meetings, just because this made me actually laugh hysterically. I asked a cap guy, contract guy, because the contract guys, a lot of them go to the owners' meetings. I said, hey, do you study Philly's contracts with these option bonuses? He goes, oh yeah, we look at every contract in the NFL. He goes, why do you ask them? Like, do you see how many contracts restructure? Oh yeah, they're number 2 in the NFL in restructures. Oh, it just
wait, hold on.
Off the bat,
that's a category. Like, there's somebody who tracks this.
I just was laughing. I'm like, how the hell do you know this? He goes, this is our job, because these guys are very matter of fact. Like, you ask them a question, you think there's no way they'll know this by heart. And he was explaining to me why. He goes, look, we don't. He goes, you're seeing a lot of teams now do what Philly does with avoidables, because it helps you keep your roster together longer. But yeah, there's a price to pay down the road if you have to start cutting a lot of guys, because the proration is just really prohibitive. But he goes, Philly's the kid that he goes, this is nothing new for them. They've been doing it for like a decade.
Who's number one, by the way? Do you know?
What's that?
Who's number one?
I'll ask. I'll find that out. And then because remember when Joe talked about that on one of our first times we interviewed him on ITB, he said the Eagles changed doing contracts after he left. They were doing work. Joe did not like doing restructures. Because you're always worried what happens with older players if you have to cut them. The proration is pretty significant.
Right.
You got to be careful with that stuff. So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you're right. It's fascinating that it's fascinating that it's sort of like a stat now, like passer rating or team defense. Oh, they're number 2 in the league in restructures.
I'm going to ask, okay, who's number 1 in guaranteed option bonus? If the Eagles aren't, I can imagine who's number 1. I mean, they definitely can't be worse than second in that.
Yeah, but, I know the Saints, right? The Saints kind of get.
Oh, they're right up there. Well, the Eagles and Saints have to be in restructures in voidable years. Oh, yeah. The total number. You remember I said I think it's got to be 50. It's probably 80 total. Anyway,
Unbelievable. All right, so that's is it, by the way, I got to make sure I get this correct. Is it Terrell Edmonds or Terrell Edmonds?
Well, it was Ferrell Edmonds' dad.
Oh, right.
I'll ask. I'm not sure. Maybe the Steelers writers. So I must have seen every Steelers reporter there. I should have asked. Yeah, now you say that. Well, we'll look it up. Sure, we want to get it right.
Yeah. All right. I would imagine it's Terrell, but I've been saying Terrell, but it might be Terrell, so I'll look into that. All right, so we're 4 weeks away from the draft. We'll talk about the roster a little bit here. Quarterbacks, still with Mariota there now, Adam. Jalen Hurts, Mariota, Ian Book. I don't know if they're going to make any more moves in free agency here. Maybe the draft or after the draft, they bring in. They have had the fourth slash developmental guy at times, so maybe you'll see
Yeah.
that this year. We'll see.
So yeah, exactly. They don't really need to add one. Some teams will have four. In fact, I've been in camps with their five quarterbacks, but that's rare. So they're okay. So as we look at their offensive roster 4 weeks away, so it's Hurts, Mariota, and they love Ian Book as that scout team quarterback
Mm-hmm.
on the look team. When you're playing an athletic quarterback, he's good for that because he can move. He can mimic some of that movement. That's a valuable thing to have.
Yep.
And then obviously Mariota is the backup for the season. But their hope is because Mariota's on a 1-year deal, that Book could be that too of the future. That would be pretty good for them.
Sure. By the way, at this time last year, well, the draft hasn't happened yet, but it's amazing that we were discussing Carson Strong and what he could possibly be, and the guy didn't even make it out of camp. So
Where's he?
crazy. Wasn't he in the
no, one of these satellite leagues?
Yeah, he was in one of those leagues, and I think he got benched or didn't play in it. Maybe he got cut. I don't know. It's crazy.
Man.
All right, so we really kind of already talked about the running back picture here. I agree with you that it's like a jigsaw puzzle that's missing something, but you don't know if it's like a major corner piece or like one of those little pieces that just because they've got some good talent here, and I don't know. I'd like to find out more about their thinking at this position because I don't know what the roles are. I think you're right to say they don't necessarily have a proven closer, and yet they don't necessarily have a proven opener or lead guy, as you would say. So fascinating.
I would say I'm sort of with you in Gainwell. There's no question he closed the season well. He regained the confidence of the coaches. He's definitely a guy like 8 to 12 touches a game, certainly possible. I think 8 to 10 is more realistic. Like 3 or 4 catches a game, 5 to 7 carries per game, somewhere between 8 and 12. Wow. Certainly showing he could do it, but not more than that.
Really? I mean, this is year 3. This is a big year for him, man. Like if he doesn't
12,
touch the ball more than 12 times a game, he's just sort of a rotational guy.
He's a rotational third down back who's really a best number 2. That could he be more? And I need to see that. I need to see him early in games take a series here or there, like not being rotated. And the other thing is he's a really good goal line back. Like that's somewhere where like when we had Ryan Silverfield on, folks, if you're new to our show, he's the head coach of Memphis. We had him on, and he gave some great stuff on Kenny, but he didn't see that. Like I actually followed up with him a year ago. Maybe last fall, and he said he didn't see that being goal line back because he was a little bit smaller when they had him. He put a little bit of bulk on, but now Sermon. Here's the book on Sermon I put this out a year ago. So what happened was they definitely projected him when they drafted him to be the starter. He came in, and he's not a bad kid. He's actually a good person, but he came in with a little bit. Oh, I know. He came in like he knew he was going to be the guy. And he didn't have the energy and focus that Shanahan wanted. And it kind of let him know it. You better get yourself together here. And he never did. And they wound up cutting him. I mean, that's a 3rd-round pick to give up a guy that quickly. That shot him straight. He knew he had to get himself together, get in a little bit better shape. And for what we had heard, starting around Thanksgiving when we started checking into it, he did a very good job. And Siriani put detail to it. I just hope that what Siriani said will happen in OTAs and in training camp. Because if it does, they got something pretty good here because they need a back with size, which he has. Gainwell's a change-up third down guy. Scott is that sort of multi-position, multi-role deal, whether it's goal line against the Giants or third down if they need him to, whatever the case may be, kick returner. And then Rashad Penny's the wild card. I don't know what to expect from him.
I agree. You just have no idea. No idea. It's a fascinating group. When I was looking at wide receiver, it made me realize sort of how fortunate the Eagles were to have Devontae Smith and AJ Brown stay healthy and have great years because depth right now, especially without Zach Pascal, is really a concern here. Quez
You're right.
Watkins is your number 3. Britton Covey is your number 4. I mean, then you've got Greg Ward, Tyree Cleveland, Devin Allen. You know, we know their stories. Now, Tyree Cleveland strikes me as the guy who's positioned to be the 2023 version of Deion Kane. Like, look really good in
Really?
camp and make a lot of catches because he's played in the NFL
What happened to
before.
him? Where is
Exactly.
he?
Exactly.
Where's Deion Kane?
He went to, I don't remember where he went.
What's he doing in the practice squad?
He was with somebody.
Deion, and by the way, Tyree Cleveland turns
Mhm.
26 in September.
Yeah, he's young. You know, I just feel like he'll make a bunch of plays and people will say, "Holy cow, this guy should be on the 53." And it probably won't happen. just like it didn't for Deion Kane. But it'll be fun to watch and see what he does. But they
Well,
really aren't
right.
deep here, Adam, after the
No,
first two. I mean, they got to address it.
honestly, Quez Watkins is a 4. Let's call him what he is. He's a 4. That's what he is. He's not a 3. That he was totally miscast. Your third receiver's got to be dependable. On third down, he's got to make that big catch, the Von type catch. Go get it. That's a possession role. Typically, your number 3 is a possession receiver. And you know they call him a vertical slot. I know he had a shoulder injury. There were not enough plays. Their hands aren't great. They need to upgrade over him. Let him be the 4. By the way, it's a final year of his rookie deal. Covey is a punt returner. He improved as a punt returner. That's all he is right now. Devin Allen, I know that they want to take a bigger look at him as a receiver in OTA, see if he can sort of push for maybe at least to be active on game day this season, as not only a kickoff return, but maybe as a receiver. But they have to address this position. I love Jarvis Landry as a slot. I really do. He could play on the outside too. He'd be a great 1-year solution to me, but we'll see who's on the radar.
He hasn't really been very productive the last few years. I mean, I know he's been hurt, and plus New Orleans had a lot of quarterback carousel. He'd be an interesting 1-year flyer. Was it you who suggested to me? Someone suggested. Was it you who suggested maybe the Eagles look at Grant Calcaterra as a possible slot wide receiver option?
Wasn't me. No.
Somebody said this to me.
Maybe
it was Mike Gill in one of our football fours. I don't know, but it didn't strike me as a really good idea. But maybe, I don't know. You know, he is more like a receiver than a tight end. His blocking has gotten a little better, not great. So I don't know. Does that strike you as something that would make you don't see that a whole lot?
No, I wouldn't. I don't see it. He's just not physical enough. He's certainly I mean, this kid can run. You could see it. We saw it in training camp. You worry about the injury history. He needs to bulk up in a bigger, major way. So yeah, to me, if I'm the Eagles, I had 2 receivers, not 1. Whether it's the one in the draft, one free agent, whatever they have to do, they got to do something.
There you go. And then as we look at the offensive line, obviously very good. I mean, the big question is really Cam Jurgens at right guard. Is he ready to play right guard? Do they need to have some depth there other than Jack Driscoll to make sure that if something goes haywire in the Cam Jurgens right guard experience, that they've got somebody who can step in there and play at a pretty good level? They seem to have pretty decent backup tackles, right, with Driscoll and Fred Johnson, and guys who played in the NFL and have starts under their belts. But at guard now, Adam, they're a little thin there for depth.
And I'm not really sold at left tackle. I know Jack Driscoll could do it, but that's a stretch.
No, but you know Fred can, right? Fred Johnson can do it.
He's done left before. Roderick Johnson could play guard. I think he's a little shorter. You're 100% right on guard. They have to. I don't think they have a choice. It's Dickerson, who has a major injury history from college. Jack Driscoll, Jurgens, who's really limited playing. Obviously, he took some snaps, but he was only center in college for 2 years. And Suapeta was also cut last season. So, to me, they got to get. In fact, someone asked me this question in the chat, and it's one I'm looking into. We need to find the value of that Northwestern offensive lineman because he's not super tall. Because
Skronsky?
Yes, the Eagles historically are a team that's going to dress linemen early. So why not look at someone first or second round? that's got positional versatility. We're talking about guard or right tackle.
Yeah, and the Eagles, no one's ever said this to me from the organization, but if you look at their history of drafting linemen, they appear to be one of those teams that places some decent amount of priority on long arms for linemen. I mean, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson has long arms, Landon Dickerson is a long arm guard.
Other than Dillard,
Other than Dillard, right?
Yeah.
He had short arms, but yeah. Who else has long armed guard? I mean, I think Kelsey's got normal arms for a center. They're not overly short or anything like that. And then Sayamalo had good arm size for an interior lineman too. So, I don't know. I don't know how they would if they feel Skronsky could play tackle. If I look into it, I bet you I would think that they see him as a guard.
Yeah, because he's 6'4". But bottom line is, we know that this team is super aggressive with drafting linemen. Sometimes a year early than they need to, but they turn out to be righteous about every time because they never want to be weak on the offensive line. So we'll have to see what happens. But to me, right now, guard is a major challenge for them. And getting a veteran would really help them. And I'm not so sure you could trust the backup. They have Brett Toth, who's been nothing but hurt since he's been here. And as you mentioned, Fred Johnson, who's had a couple starts, but I don't know if you want to count on that. So that certainly is a challenge for the team. They got to look into that.
No doubt about it. All right. Next podcast, we're going to have a lot more good stuff. We emptied the notebook there from owners' meetings.
It's fun.
Great stuff. Look forward to doing it again next week on, Monday morning will be the next
defense.
Inside the Birds podcast. Yeah, we'll go through defense. A lot of stuff, a lot of stuff to go through on the defensive side of the ball as far as holes left to fill and what the Eagles might be doing there. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. As always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.